All right, welcome to the Bacon, Bibles, and Barbells Podcast. I am Justin Johnson. I'm joined by the great and powerful Coach Bill. Today we are talking about the thyroid. There's obviously we could do like 20 episodes on the thyroid. This will be a nice overview, and we'll try to keep it to things that are most practical for the everyday person, especially you ladies, because it's often, I think, probably more often an issue with women than it is with men, although I don't know if that's really the way it is or just how we think about it. Anyway, but first, we'll just briefly talk about where Bill and I are in our training and periodization blocks. So I'll just go first real fast. I just came off of a 3.5 month diet or so. I started at about 262 pounds, ended it at about, I've been weighing like 255, 257. So that sounds like abysmal results. Because it would be if the scale was the only thing I was measuring. I think I gained a little bit of muscle mass. I was training reasonably high volume, was very strict about my diet for the most part, and things just seem to have gone well. I am fairly predisposed to putting on muscle mass. I'm probably better at that than I am as a strength athlete, but I like strength more. So bodybuilders can, just stay away for now. Maybe later in life.
That's for when you're old.
Yeah, it's a great thing for me to do when I'm older. I'll be easier on my body. So that's where I am. I'm just kind of working my way up to maintenance slowly. I'm going to be lifting heavier weights soon, but I'm feeling pretty fatigued from the diet and everything else and other life circumstance. So I'm not quite ready to go squat 600 pounds. I just don't feel like that'd be wise. But I'm going to be working back up to higher numbers. I'll be training bench reasonably heavy soon, just because I have a poverty bench, so it's not actually that bad. I can't fatigue myself too much on it. But anyway, goal will be this summer, bench 405 at about this body weight without anything special, and actually just do it in training without having to do a hard block or gain weight into it like I did last time. So, Bill, what are you up to?
Well, so I also am at the end of my dieting phase, my fat loss phase, which is great. I'm at maintenance now. Diet-wise, it's pretty simple. I'm not tracking anything. I'm eating all the cutting board stuff that people eat off the cutting board.
Charcuterie board.
Yeah, so think like meat and cheese and fruit and things like that. Some potatoes and things like that. Very little bread. So just that stuff. I just don't eat it off a board, and that works fairly well. And most of my diet will consist of lean ground beef and high quality cheeses, and then fruit for the most part. Now, I will be doing something else that we can talk about on a different podcast, but I will be sugar dieting, which is a thing that's been famous for a while, but has now come back up. For folks that don't respond to high fat well, they can respond to high carb with low protein for a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And so you would eat basically almost nothing but sugar. And I say sugar, but you think carbs in the form of potatoes, rice, fruit. You can have candy. I don't feel amazing on candy, so I don't do a ton of that. I don't do fruit
juice. A bunch of people are doing things like jelly beans and stuff like that. I can see a handful right before or after or during training.
Yeah.
But
Sour Patch Kids are great too for that. As a meal, it feels pretty horrible. And so fruit
you're not
works
getting
a lot
nutrition
better.
Too. You're just getting sugar.
Precisely. So I'll do several weeks of that for a photo shoot that I have just to sort of lean out. And you might go, wow, you're never going to lean out like that. But you really do. You drop fat real fast that way. You burn something like 30% more calories because your FGF goes up. By quite a bit.
You run a lot warmer. I mean, I haven't done the sugar diet, but when I'm carbing up for, or whatever, even like when I go really high carb, but I'm not quite at the point where I'm going to gain weight, you're just going to run more warm. Your body is cooking. Yeah.
You run hot, you'll sweat and things like that. So I'll do a little bit of that before a photo shoot. But I really can't go lower on calories at this point because I flatten out. And so that'll be great. I am going to compete in an open class in a regional thing here in next March.
Do you usually is that what you've done in the past is open?
I did physique, and I was never good at it because my waist is too big. And that's fine, no problem. So I'll do an open, and I'll probably be the smallest guy there, which is fine. But right now, I'm just looking to add another half inch or so to my arms. Another inch or two to my chest would be great. My chest is hovering right around 48 inches right now, which
That's
for my
what
height
I think that's about where mine is. Yeah.
pretty good. And so I'll look to do that. My mesos will be focused around that. It'll be back and arms and chest, just
What do
like
you
it's
weigh right
always
now?
been. Right now, I'm 225.
Okay. And you guys, we're probably at a similar body fat at the moment, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, about 16, 17%. Yeah, I would say 15 maybe if we're lucky.
Okay. I think I'm a little lower than that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, true. You're leaner than I am right now for sure.
Yeah. This is probably the first time since we've known each other. I'm probably actually like slightly leaner than you, I guess, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And some of that's just a comfort thing for recovery for me. I can't go real low right now because I'm still trying to put on size. And so even at a maintenance level, I'm carrying my love handles and my back fat. You'll see that in my pictures.
Yeah.
Luckily for
You
me,
and I
my
store
abs
fat
show,
very differently.
yeah, luckily my abs show really well. I've just always shown.
We
well.
do both have that attribute pretty good. Although I think yours are actually better than mine.
But so I'll look to put on a little size for the remainder of the year. And that's another thing we can talk about on a different podcast is I do bulk. I'll bulk for an entire year. It just makes sense if you're doing it intelligently.
You still have mesos within that. So it's, there has to be a variety and some degree of novelty and things like that. And
all the science-based people need to stop oppressing bulkers. Stop the bulker oppression.
Well, I mean, if perma-bulking never worked, then why powerlifter exist?
Yeah, exactly. So no, that's where I am. Just adding in a little more cardio to keep the heart healthy. I'll add in 2 more sessions of uphill walks, so that'll put me at 5 days a week on cardio, which is perfect. That's fine.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah.
So that's really it.
Cool. Awesome. Well, let's get into our topic then. So thyroid. So real quick, what does the thyroid do, Bill? What is it for? Why do we have one?
Yeah, so the thyroid's actually part of an entire hormonal system that begins in the pituitary gland, and so the pituitary gland will it's not your pituitary gland, it's your hypothalamus, really, if we're being honest, that releases TRH, and TRH it's basically just a call for thyroid hormone, and then your thyroid will activate some thyroid stimulating hormone, and your pituitary gland will help do that, as well. And then you have 2 thyroid hormones, T4 and T3, which we'll talk about. But basically, your thyroid controls every metabolic function in your body. It is the second step in the metabolic process. And you mentioned that women have more issues with this. The reason it's more prominent is because men have more testosterone, and it can counteract the effects of that lack of metabolic function because testosterone can take over some of that metabolic feedback. So real quick
to summarize... hypothalamus makes TRH. That signals the pituitary. Pituitary releases TSH. TSH interacts with the thyroid directly, and that will modulate how much thyroid hormone you produce. That being primarily directly T4, which is the generally not always, but usually inactive form of thyroid. It will then on demand convert that to T3, which is what we consider to be the most potent and active version of T3, which interacts with basically every cell in your body that has mitochondria, right? I mean,
it should be noted that serum levels. Serum levels of T3 they don't mean anything because T3 is made in your tissues. So there's no the serum is the amount of
Isn't
T3
most of it converted in the thyroid
releases.
though, and then there's other target tissues also that have the enzyme that does so.
So it's actually mostly in your kidneys and your liver that it gets converted. And so
that's right.
T4,
It's been a while since I read this.
Now some does get converted. So think about when it releases from the thyroid, it's about an 80-20 mix of T4 and T3.
Yeah, that's right. I'm remembering now. I think most of it's the liver. So I haven't read about it in minutes. I know about supplementing it and stuff like that, controlling it, but you don't have to get into this stuff. So when someone is low on T3 or something like that, or T4, let's just say that they're having issues. What symptoms should they look for where they should be like, I should get my thyroid tested? And if they test it, what should we be doing with blood work to assess because I find, or at least I believe, that it's actually easier to see if thyroid is root cause of many symptoms or problems than it is testosterone. Because
It
testosterone,
is.
low testosterone symptoms overlap with so many systems, including thyroid. But thyroid blood work is usually more cut and dry to read, in my opinion.
It is.
So what symptoms would someone be experiencing where that would lead them to go, I should have my thyroid assessed?
Yeah. So if you're low, what's going to happen is you're going to feel things like you're going to be cold more often. Your body temperature is going to run lower. So, for example, I have a low grade fever at 98.1 because I run at 96.5, typically speaking, most of the time. And so you'll be cold. You will be sluggish, and I mean tired. You cannot get out of bed. You don't have energy for stuff.
Yeah.
You're not going to be hungry. You're going to lose some of your appetite. But when you eat, you're going to gain weight.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. You'll be eating less than ever, and you'll gain some weight. In men, you'll have some erectile problems potentially. In women, you will have you might actually have hot flashes and things like this that feel perimenopausal.
Yeah.
In women, you can also have the hardening of breast tissue is a really good indicator that you have low thyroid or Hashimoto's. And so just some things like that to look out for. Those are really the primary things. Any other symptoms that you would have that would pin you as low, you would probably put you in the hospital. And so you'd know that right away.
So one that I have, this is how I actually figured out, because I was tired all the time, but I mean, who isn't, right? When you have like little kids and stuff, that was the season of life for me when I discovered it. For me, my TSH was running high, and I was going hypothyroid, of course. So high TSH, low T4. I just wasn't making enough. And my thyroid made me feel like I was always being choked a little bit. It was so swollen. Yeah. So it feels like someone's pushing right here. Those of you on the video, like right here, right where if you've ever seen someone get like a trach tube, that spot, that's where your thyroid is. It'll feel like someone's pushing there with a finger. It'll make you feel like you're almost gagging all the time.
Yeah, it actually can feel like you're having a panic attack.
It interferes with breathing a little bit. Yeah,
it does, and especially when you eat, it will swell
there's
more.
Just the nerve that it's on. I think it induces a sympathetic response.
Well, it's your vagal nerve, right?
Yeah,
and so so it's the same thing as anything that sits along that vagal nerve is going to cause that vagal response, and so you'll feel like you're constantly performing a Valsalva maneuver, which is really uncomfortable. And the other thing I would say, and this is one that I don't say it much because people don't monitor it, but if you do monitor it, your heart rate will be low, and I mean exceedingly low. I've had mine drop as low as 38 beats a minute.
That's really low.
And at some point, you will start to have PACs and PVCs because you're going into what's called pseudo heart failure.
Yeah, your heart is so understimulated electrically that it's just like it almost gets lethargic, right?
It gets scared that it's going into heart failure. You're not, but it gets scared that it is, and it starts shooting those.
It's like it's getting the signals that mimic. Yeah, some of the conditions are similar. Yeah.
And so that's what I would look for.
Yeah,
and then that's right.
Which can feel a lot like arrhythmia, right?
It can, and it's not a true arrhythmia. It's not dangerous. It's and they're gonna listen when you have low thyroid. They're gonna make you go to the cardiologist as well. Because your thyroid hormones do control your heart rate, your blood pressure, and all that good stuff. And so I would say, if you're at that point, get tested. You need to get 2 tests: regular thyroid panel, which is TSH, T4, T3, and then you want to have them run a centrifugal T4 analysis, where they measure your free T4 after running your blood through a centrifuge. And it tells them what is truly going on with the amount of T4 that's able to be absorbed by your tissues. Yeah. So something to note here is that when you have any metabolite in your body, this is like a concussion. So when you get a concussion, you get all these metabolites that come out, and all the symptoms are because there's all these metabolites floating around. It's the same thing with TSH. You have too many of the metabolites that aren't getting processed. And so they're just giving you all kinds of heck because you've got these
A lot of
metabolites
excessive signaling that you don't want.
yeah, it's
right?
just all this excessive signaling. And so you got to wait it out, which is horrible.
Yeah.
And it feels terrible. So you want to have those run. If your TSH is high and you're experiencing symptoms, it's pretty much a dead ringer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like with me, it's the most simple kind to diagnose.
Yeah. And if your T4 is low, same thing. If you're having symptoms, your T4 being low can mean a couple of things though. Either you're not producing it or it's not absorbing. And about 20% of thyroid patients have a genetic disfiguration of the thyroid that interferes with its ability to absorb where you would normally have uptake receptors. And so
for TSH, is that what you're talking to?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And so that's going to present itself in that way as well. With everybody else, it's just a low production, typically speaking. And if you have low T4, then you definitely have low T3. There really is no two ways about that.
Yeah, you can proportionally have lower T4 than T3. That's the case with me because your body will try to convert as much as possible, but there's still not enough to go around.
And that's why you inexplicably gain body fat because you're not actually running as high as you would be if the tissue levels of T3 were the same as your serum levels, right?
Yeah, and to be clear too, like it's not like you're going to get fat if this happens.
No.
But it will be harder for you to manage your weight for sure because you're looking
and it doesn't even mean
I think it's around 10% lower metabolism. It's like 7 to 10% on average if you have an underactive thyroid.
Every pound that you weigh, you can subtract 10 calories for it from what would be normal maintenance for a normal human, right?
Okay.
Like without the thyroid issues. It's not perfect, but it's a good assessment. It's a good adjustment to that. Now, that can be mitigated, but yeah, you're not just going to swell up overnight. That's not how it works.
No. We're talking like it'll take you years typically before the weight shows up. I actually think that you feel poorly and that leads to binge eating, and that's probably more profound than the physiological effects. I think the psychological effects have way more potential for harm. Also because you have sleep disruption, you're going to be awake more, therefore more likely to be hungry, and you just don't feel as good. You're more likely to turn to food for comfort. I think that all of those factors tend to lead toward weight gain in a far more significant manner than the actual like physiological downregulation of metabolism.
Yeah, because you won't be able to consume much even when you're binging. And so it's just one of those things like you feel like, gosh, how can this possibly be? I eat and then I feel sick and I don't want to eat for the rest of the day. Yeah. But it doesn't matter, right? Because you're in such a bad state metabolically in general, right? Yeah. You're not sleeping. You definitely don't feel like lifting weights for sure if you're low.
It was very challenging because it was during my training history. Yeah. And it was very, very challenging to do everything. I mean, it just even mentally, you're not as sharp. You get it's not the same kind of brain fog you get from like low testosterone. It's not that bad, but you're definitely not as sharp and on the ball. Your brain works slower. It's weird. It's like there's a little down regulation, and it does stink. Like it's not what you want. I think that the solution to this is not always to go on thyroid replacement. I think a lot of the population doesn't need it. I know you do because your thyroid's been nuked because you had autoimmune disease, which is all too common. I suspect a lot of people get that because of environmental issues that we don't fully understand now, because I really doubt 100 years ago this many people had Hashimoto's.
No, I don't think so. And the real indicator of the environmental aspect is the fact that it mostly has to do with iodine deficiency. Yeah. And so there's something going on environmentally that causes the iodine deficiency. And then if you have autoimmune disorder on top of that, or if you go long enough, right, it's causing sort of a more permanent damage to the organ or organs. There's 4 of them. And so I think you're right. And I think any doctor worth their salt would say it's partially genetic, but also there's a lot of environmental factors there that contribute.
Well, some people are going to be immune to greater and lesser degrees to certain kinds of deficiencies. You might be actually probably you and me both are probably genetically predisposed to be less efficient with our iodine intake than certain other persons. Probably.
Right.
And so I would tell anybody that, and now I tried supplements first. So I actually tried to supplement my way out of it for about 3 years. And I got symptom relief. Blood work didn't look good, but we don't treat blood work. We treat symptoms. My sleep got good again. I started taking selenium, iodine, copper, and I didn't do much else. There's other things you can do too that we can go into in a minute. I also added magnesium. Those allowed me to sleep. I basically had symptom relief for about 3 years is what that bought me. And then I had to start getting on T4 in order to just have a higher quality of life. And my T4 dose has escalated over the years, both as I've gotten bigger and I suspect as my thyroid has continued to underperform. And if you are someone who's putting on muscle mass, by the way, the bigger you are, the more thyroid hormone you need. The general guideline is for total replacement is at or just above 1 microgram daily per pound of body weight. And the formula works out pretty darn well. Now, not everyone needs total replacement. Your thyroid might be partially active. So I used to be on 100 micrograms. I am on 250 micrograms now because that's just what it takes to be able to sleep. And that's actually textbook full replacement dose.
Yeah, and I'm on 300, but that's because I have a really severe form of the disorder.
Yeah, and mine doesn't shut down. My TSH will still be at the low end of the range, so I'm still, I'm producing on top of that. But for a lot of people, you are likely to be able to resolve this with supplementing. What I'd say is in the morning, you take your selenium, iodine, copper, and then in the evening, that's when you take your magnesium. Honorable mentions that can help with this would obviously be sunlight exposure, particularly morning and evening, or a red light therapy device. I'd say you need 30 minutes at 100 watts per day in total. Again, you want that at the bookends of the day. Cold exposure seems to help too. I don't know why. I think there's a dopamine interaction with thyroid production and cortisol. I don't fully understand it. I think there are people out there that do, but I will say that on a hunch, we added that to my wife came off of thyroid replacement a while ago, and because hers had basically shut down during a diet phase, so she went on T3, T4, and everything. So that totally suppresses everything. Yeah. We got her going again just fine with these supplements, and it was like really slow, but it was happening. We added cold exposure in the mornings for just like 5 minutes, and she rapidly recovered function. There does seem to be something to that.
Yeah, agreed. I think, there are some other things that you can consider if the initial supplementation line you mentioned there, which is perfect, by the way, for a thyroid patient. You can also consider like tyrosine. You are probably deficient in omega-3s. And so
like we all are.
Everybody's deficient in that. You can use more powerful stuff like ashwagandha. I don't recommend doing that for long periods of time. It's liver toxic. You can supplement with vitamin D, but I think sunlight exposure is the best. The UV of the sun needs to be above a 7 in order to stimulate that. And so walking in the sunlight in the winter won't necessarily have the same effect. And so there may be a time where supplementing a little bit is better.
So I do know a number of coaches and other people that I've worked with. I've never really pushed anyone this way because I just haven't happened to work with someone that it was necessary for. They have fine thyroid function in the summer, but they'll go on like 25, 50 micrograms in the winter just because they feel better, they sleep better, things are just kind of better, and there's only so much outdoor time you can get in practical senses. And that seems like a pretty innocuous way to handle it, in my opinion.
It is. And the other thing is, don't believe any scare tactics about taking the hormone. You're not going to have a heart attack.
No.
That's not going to happen.
You can overdose and have a heart attack.
Sure, but even that takes so much. So
can I give a brief story real quick, though, about that?
Sure.
So when I got put on T4, so if you go back and read, go back in the Wayback Engine, I first got put on it and I was misdiagnosed. Actually, I don't think I actually had any real issues. It was a doctor that was a little trigger happy about prescribing it. And so she put me on like, I think it was 75 micrograms daily. This is back when I weighed about 130 pounds. So like, not a crazy dose. However, if you go back and read like 2016 or so, somewhere in that time frame, there was a bunch of T4 that was produced overseas that was way overdosed, like 10 times normal dose. First few days was fine. I took one dose in the morning. I was just taking them in the morning. Took one dose, felt fine. I got to work and it felt like my heart was going to explode out of my head. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I was dizzy. I never checked my blood pressure. I assure you it was very dangerously high. You can feel the blood pressure. It was absolutely horrible. And I sat there and I was at work and I had a bunch of meetings in person. And so I'm just trying to not sweat to death and just like, man, I hope nobody notices. Cause I was also like, you have to breathe heavy the whole time. Like it's really annoying. Anyway, you can get very uncomfortable blood pressure wise if you have what might have been up to 10 times what I was supposed to be having in one dose.
It'll wind you up for sure.
You feel anxious too. You feel like something terrible is about to happen. It's
actually a warning on the bottle.
Yeah,
you're going to feel anxious when you're first going on it if you have a significant dose to start off with, and so just be ready for that. But what I would say also is that for anybody that is taking the hormone, you don't have to take it in the morning. You can also take it at night. It depends on your absorption capabilities, right? Some people don't do well with that. Sometimes it needs several hours in the system. Almost anything can interfere with it. It is the most annoying medicine in the world to take for that reason. And so it's, there are some considerations like that. I would also say that if you're looking at, supplementing for the thyroid, it's probably worth at least getting some levels on some basic electrolytes to make sure you're like, you don't want to overdose magnesium, for example. That'll actually do more harm than good if you've got good magnesium levels. But you might rather use zinc, instead if you've got lower zinc. You might now here's a surprising thing. You might need more sodium. Yeah, you're typically going to need more sodium, especially iodized salt, as a thyroid patient or somebody with low thyroid. And so, iodine from fish or from salt is a good idea. If you start gaining weight, the absolute last thing you want to do is go high fat. The worst possible outcomes for thyroid patients. You must not do it. It will make the situation so much worse. And so
your thyroid will want to downregulate.
Oh my gosh. It interferes with uptake in every single way. And that's its job, And so it's not the fat's fault, right? It's just being overused in a situation where it's inappropriate. Yep. And so high fat diets are never appropriate for thyroid patients. High carb diets is really what you want to look at. Yeah. You're going to need more salt. You may actually need less potassium, which is insane to think about. Most people don't have enough. And so, but the reason is because you actually need to retain the water for the metabolic function in your tissues. Yeah. And you need the iodine.
And one thing I do want to say on the salt too, you might need more salt in general. Of course, you mentioned iodized salt. I just want to address really quickly all these fads around like whatever your Celtic sea salt and whatever other, alpine, pine salt or whatever the heck you think you're getting. Look, I get they taste good. Some of them taste better in a way in certain dishes and stuff like that. Just realize there's nothing wrong with you doing it. In fact, the micronutrients can be useful. However, you are not getting enough iodine if you do this, because the only iodine most of us get as Americans is in our salt. Our food does not have it. The soil's been mostly depleted of it. It's not in good enough quantities in most of the foods we eat unless you eat a very specific diet with like a lot of fish or something like that. So specifically like saltwater fish. So like I would recommend anybody who's using those salts, you got to be on an iodine supplement, or your thyroid probably will eventually fail, or you'll need to be on replacement or something along those lines. It's not bad to use those things, but just realize that like it's not bad that iodine was added to salt and that we use iodized salt. It's very effective. It works. And if you're not doing that anymore, if you're not partaking in that any longer, you're going to have to replace that iodine with somewhere else. And it's fine if you want to do it, but just get your iodine in. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And you want to also avoid just a ton of cruciferous vegetables. You just have to make different vegetable choices. Watery vegetables are better if you're going to eat them in mass. That doesn't mean you can't have broccoli and cauliflower and spinach and stuff you like that.
Yeah.
But things like zucchini, squash, asparagus and things like that, green beans, they're going to do you a sight better. The cruciferous vegetables do have a pretty reliable, track record of suppressing thyroid function and also suppressing uptake of any thyroid medication that you're taking. And so you can kind of overdo it a little bit with some of those things. And so, bodybuilders have this trouble. They'll eat chicken, broccoli, and rice on their prep, and they're probably taking T4 and T3. And then they go, why isn't my medicine working? And it's because they're eating 3 pounds of broccoli a day. And it's not going to work.
I don't eat those
way.
Vegetables anyway. I do not digest them well.
Yeah.
So no,
I
don't have to worry about that.
I like watery vegetables better anyhow. And fruit especially, right? But you're going to be better off with that. I will say the one exception to that is if the one exception to the fat intake is if you're eating polyunsaturated fat, which is in avocados, typically is where you would find that in a sort of natural form. That can be really good, right, for uptake. You just don't want to overdo it. You don't want to overdo it. And so
calories still matter.
Those are just some consideration. Yeah, exactly. You still a consideration.
Avocados are still mostly fat. You have to be careful.
They are. And because they're so rich in potassium, they can throw off I would recommend salting avocado if you use it.
Yeah, you want the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, because you want to have that balance. And so I think that's right. And there's a couple other things to consider is that low thyroid that occurs from environmental factors only that can be reversed with supplementation, and also with weightlifting. The more tissue you have, the more thyroid hormone you need, and thus you can solve the issue there by just getting bigger and stronger.
It solves all sorts of problems.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a couple of considerations to think about. If you started off low thyroid and you do have to go on total replacement, it's a different protocol, and there's a different set of considerations for diet and exercise, as well as supplementation amounts and things like that, than you would if you were in like my situation where I had Graves' disease, where it's extreme hyperthyroidism, and they have to either take your thyroid out or they have to nuke it.
Yeah.
Because that your body.
I thought you had Hashimoto's. Okay, so you had.
Well, I do now, right? So so that's the flip side of Graves is Hashimoto's. Right?
Your body attacks it when it's nuked.
Correct. So when it's nuked, your body goes, that's an invader, and it starts hitting it with antibodies. Yeah. Right. And you get more of the thyroid, symptoms and things like that. They just exacerbates the issue. Yeah. The other thing to be considerate of, and so your doctor will treat you differently, but also you need to really go by symptoms and not serum levels, because the disparity between those two different situations is pretty vast. Those are two very different patients. And so always make sure that you're communicating with your doctor. I don't feel well. I don't care what my levels say. I don't feel well. Yeah. I'm having this symptom or that symptom. Yeah. And that's something just to consider there. The other thing to consider is that T3 therapy, if you go on it, is not meant to be for life. That's actually pretty dangerous.
Some people it has to be, unfortunately.
Yes, but it should be like periodized, like we do anything else, because it is such a powerful hormone. And so
it shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yeah, correct. So you don't want to just throw it back, right? Like that's not, because you can really, really hurt your heart and stuff like that if you do that. But you'd have to be abusing it in most cases.
Yeah, I mean,
But the idea is
yeah,
that
the people that
the
are on like
T3 is
armor.
supposed to be it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, like the people that are on armor thyroid, like you're not in much danger. Usually, it's a very
No.
high T4 to T3 ratio. You're really just kind of like supplementing T3 output in that case. You know, I wouldn't say that that's particularly worrisome if you're on it for life necessarily.
No.
But I would say don't go on one of those unless you know you need T3 and T4, because T4 supplementation is just a lot less risk. It's a lot easier to manage. And you start adding T3, it changes the game. And it's not what you want.
Well, and you can push T4 very high if you have absorption and creation issues for T3 without any real nasty side effects or any side effects at all for that matter. And so, like I said, I'm on 300 micrograms. And they'll look at my serum T4 levels and go, how is your heart not beating out of your chest? And it's like 48 beats a minute, 50 beats a minute, because there's just an issue with the T3 itself.
Are you on T3 as well, or do you
just only during certain parts of the year, and
like winter?
It's 5 micrograms 3 times a day.
Oh, that's annoying.
Yeah, and so it's very annoying. And so that's sort of how it should look potentially. And the idea is that the T3 should help your metabolic function get back up to where you can do more of the healthy stuff. You're walking, you're lifting weights, you're feeling more normal, and then hopefully it levels out for a period of time is the hope, right?
Yeah.
The other thing to consider is the formulation of the medicines are completely different between generics and name brand. And stuff like that. The delivery systems are different. And so there will be people that if they take levothyroxine generic, they will not feel well. And some people will have to take Synthroid. Some people take Synthroid, they don't feel well, so they take the generic.
Yeah. And
so
even if you go between generics, you're going to have absorption differences. So it might be that it's fine for you, but you might have to double your dose or cut your dose in half. Because like the binders, it's you don't know how you're going to absorb it. It's not like a lot of other drugs are more consistent as far as absorption goes, but thyroid medication in particular, you can get wildly different results between brands.
Well, and there's sodium delivery systems because they have to be processed really, really quick. This is just a quick side note. Sodium in foods and in things that you eat and consume help them get processed quicker in your stomach. Yeah. And so that's a thing that they use that delivery system so that it can get processed quicker because it is a long acting medicine. And so depending on the sodium delivery system that they use, it could be better or it could be worse depending on how you tolerate it and whether or not your body, can use it effectively or whatever. And so all of that is really, really important to consider. And so, obviously that's pretty far into the weeds, right? We've got to have another podcast on that, but just something to consider as you go forward.
And part of what makes honestly T4 easier to dose without T3 is T4 has a long half-life. It's like 7 to 10 days. Right. Like if you miss a day, whatever, you don't double dose the next, it's just fine. You won't even notice. Nothing happens. It's got a nice long half-life. You make adjustments slowly, carefully. You don't get like ups and downs, like there can be, it doesn't matter when you take it for some people, other people it doesn't. Like you don't have to manage it like T3 because T3 does have a very, very short half-life. And it's just it's a different game altogether. The goal is to avoid having to take it, like you said, and maybe you're on it for a while, like you mentioned, and then you come off because you're able to do lifestyle intervention, which, by the way, for those of you listening that are doing this, being outdoors is probably the most important, and selenium. Selenium is used to clear hydrogen peroxide, which is generated in the thyroid and liver at conversion, and can actually like basically gum up the works, if you will. Like it's like actual hydrogen peroxide produced in those. In both of them, and selenium binds to it, neutralizes that so that it can be cleared out. But if you don't have selenium, basically they build up, and you can actually get thyroid and liver damage over time because you're not clearing what is basically could build up to a toxic level in those. And that's part of why some people get thyroid nodules.
Right.
It's actually from just lack of selenium would just take care of it in some cases.
Yeah, and I think it's critical to state too that if you've reached that point, and this is just something coming from a lifetime thyroid patient with really severe disease, just have your thyroid taken out. Just have it taken out because leaving those nodules in place, that is a potential risk for cancer. It's a potential risk for all kinds of metabolic dysfunction. Your thyroid can, as you said, that feedback loop can damage your liver. It can damage your kidneys. If you let it go long enough, it can damage your heart. In fact, one of the things that hypothyroid and Hashimoto's patients die from most commonly is heart failure.
Yeah.
And so, all of your metabolic systems slowing down is a really bad thing. You want to keep them running at a really high level as often as you can. And so the reason we're talking about lifestyle intervention is because those are the things that most directly affect your metabolic function. You need to be getting good sleep. You need to be working out and having lean tissue on your body. It is armor against these kinds of outcomes.
Yeah.
You need to have good insulin function. You need to have all of these things squared away in your life. Because if you don't, your thyroid will destroy your life. It will kill you.
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous disease. And so, but the good news is most people aren't in that boat. Their thyroid disease is actually just a thyroid dysfunction that can be repaired like anything else, as long as it's
supplements, diet.
Exactly. And I will say this. I have noticed a better result from more creatine in my diet and in supplementation as well. And that's simply because you hold a little more water in your tissues on creatine. And that is really, really helpful when you're trying to increase metabolic function and also not feel so tired and crampy and, and gross in your tissues.
It's another reason to run testosterone a little higher too, I guess, right?
Yeah, right, correct. And so, that's another thing. That's another thing I will say. If you're a thyroid patient, if you're on TRT, expect your dose to be higher. You will have trouble metabolizing almost anything you put in your body, so just expect that. And that's okay. No problem. You just have to know that up front. One other consideration is no muscle relaxers. If you're a significant thyroid patient, a muscle relaxer will last 3 times as long in your system. And here's how muscle relaxers work. They relax the tissues by giving they actually produce a lack of stimulus nervously for the muscle spindles. The longer it's in your system, the more tissues it affects. Well, your smooth tissues can also be affected by that, which is your liver and kidneys specifically will be affected. And so you don't want to take a muscle relaxer ever when you're a thyroid patient. If you've got really low thyroid, whether it's environmental or whether it's genetic or a mix.
You can get weird edge case side effects too. You can feel really sick.
Correct. And so that's just a thing you have to know. You're metabolizing things slower as a rule in your body, even when it's controlled. And so if something works as a metabolite in your body over the course of time, you have to consider what contraindications it has with your thyroid condition and the medicine that you're taking. T4 medicine has contraindications with almost everything. So it's really important to check what you're taking and see if it's going to cause a problem with your T4. And so the other thing is vaccines are inappropriate for thyroid patients, that you should be very careful with any vaccines you take because they work in that same metabolic feedback loop that you have with all of your pituitary function, all of your metabolic function, and your immune function. And so if you take a vaccine, you could expect to see a spike in your TSH for upwards of 3 months, right? Yeah. It could be really, really disturbing and cause you some serious symptoms. Be very, very careful about any of those things that you're doing. And so I would say those are really the primary considerations. The other thing is, of course, depression. You mentioned that there is definitely some hormonal effect with that. You can easily get depressed. And so, you just have to know one of the things that I always tell folks with low thyroid or thyroid disorder is you just have to know when that sudden wave hits, you got to go, hey, I know what this is.
Yeah.
And then you either, if you need to visit your doctor, if you need an adjustment on your medicine or something, that's fine. If you're not supplementing or dieting the way you should, if you're eating Baconators every day, you know if you're doing.
Yeah.
And so make those adjustments. If you're getting 2 hours of sleep at night, you know that stuff. If you're exercising, you know if you're doing cardio or lifting weights. And so fix all of that stuff. Make sure that your supplements are in order. Make sure your diet is covering 80% of the supplementation you would need, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
And then supplement whatever else is necessary on top of that to help you sort of get out of the hole. But I would say 90% of people, probably 95% of people with thyroid dysfunction don't need hormone replacement, at least not permanently.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Yeah, I think that often, in most cases, minor lifestyle intervention plus maybe a couple supplements would get people taken care of. And you wouldn't have to be on medication for life. And
no, it is not impossible to get lean with a funky thyroid either.
No, I weighed 135 pounds and I'm 5'11".
Yeah,
when my thyroid was almost shut down, I get that it's easier to gain weight, but it's manageable. You'll be fine.
The advantage of it is it's also easier to gain muscle if you're doing things right. You will gain more tissue over time. And so, the good news is there that, especially if it's managed through lifestyle and supplementation or through a proper medication route, if that's what you require, you will actually have some of the benefit of being able to put on positive size as well. But you do have to be a little careful. No more turbo bulking, unfortunately.
Yep. Well, cool. Awesome. I think that was a good intro. We'll probably want to do some more thyroid content because there's a lot of rabbit holes that we kind of skipped over today. For those of you that are interested in working with us, we do have a lot of experience working with people that have thyroid issues and trying to avoid medication or even helping you work with your doctor better. Because doctors don't have a ton of specific training in this matter. And so helping you learn how to interact, the right questions to ask, things like that. We can help you with all that. Come visit us at highcallingfitness.com. We'd be happy to have further discussion with how we can help you out. And until next time, gains and grace.
Gains and grace.